Hi, I'm Dr. Don Stinson. I'm sorry the image isn't any clearer. I can't seem to get my screen bright enough to make me bright enough for you to be able to see me. But I wanted to talk to you for just a minute about the readings that you've been doing, hopefully doing. I'm sure you all have been. I've been following your discussion board post. I haven't had time to comment on all of them yet, but I can tell that most of you are reading regularly and posting regularly, and that's good. We started with Plato's allegory of the cave. That is considered a seminal or foundational work in Western cultural history. Plato was the student of Socrates, who was the first of a trio of great Greek philosophers. There was Socrates, his student Plato, and then Plato's student Aristotle, who was coincidentally the tutor of Alexander the Great military commander who conquered much of the area around the Mediterranean during the heyday of the Greek Empire. Socrates did not believe in writing, and Socrates also was a controversial figure. He was accused by some of his rival tutors and by the city authorities of Athens of corrupting the morals of the youth of Athens by encouraging them to question everything. And ultimately, Socrates was sentenced to death for subversion against the authorities. He was given a choice of exile or death, and he chose death. Plato writes very movingly about Socrates' death in his book Phaedra, in the Apology of Socrates section. So Socrates never wrote anything down. Plato, as a good student, followed him around and wrote down everything that Socrates said. So everything we know about Socrates comes to us through Plato. The traditional way of reading the allegory of the cave is that it's about humans' ascent from ignorance to knowledge. And that could be ignorance about the world and about the way it works, in which case we see it as a parable about education or learning. It also can be read as a spiritual document, that it's the human soul's progression from sin to salvation, seeing the light, if you will. However you read it, though, it set a pattern for centuries of writings that came after it, and I still think it holds up very well today. One fairly recent, it's probably too old now to be current for many of you, but one fairly recent cultural artifact that directly borrows from the allegory of the cave is the Wachowski siblings film trilogy, The Matrix, because in that you have human beings who are enslaved by machines and computers. They're fed a virtual reality that they think is their lives, and they have to break free of that to see the reality, which is that they're slaves. It becomes ultimately just another action-packed sci-fi flick, but the concept comes directly from the allegory of the cave, and the Wachowski siblings have admitted as such. So it is an incredibly important work. Obviously, your task as learners in this class, but even more in life, right, is to get out of the darkness and into the light. The second piece you read, Henry David Thoreau's excerpt from Walden, is about the attempt by one very eccentric New Englander living in the 1800s to find out just how simply a human being can live a life. Henry David Thoreau, who was also a poet, asked his friend Ralph Waldo Emerson, the essayist, lecturer, and poet, if he could build a cabin out on the shores of Walden Pond near Concord, Massachusetts, where they lived. Emerson agreed to let Thoreau build a cabin on his land, and he even loaned him an axe so that he could go out, cut down some pine trees, and build a cabin. He built a small cabin about the size of many people's bedrooms, 10 by 12, 12 by 12, something like that, and lived alone in it for 2 years. He raised a crop of beans, which he would harvest, take into town, and sell to buy food, because he didn't eat beans, as it turned out. He ate a mostly vegetarian diet, supplemented by a few fish that he caught from Walden Pond. He kept careful records of his stay at Walden, and that culminated in his book, Walden, which takes the 2 years that he actually spent there and condenses it down into 1 year. It's a classic work of American literature, one that I teach every fall in my early American literature class. One of my favorite books. It's inspired generations of nature lovers, environmentalists, hermits, anyone that just thinks there's more to life than working a 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 job, 40 hours a week until you die, right? And of course, for many of us, 40 hours a week would be a blessing. I don't know why the screen just got lighter all of a sudden. It's like the lights came on. Right? So you can see every white hair in my beard now, which is not that great. The third thing that you read was David Foster Wallace's Kenyon College Commencement Address, 2005. Foster Wallace was, at the time of his death in 2008, regarded as the hottest American novelist of his generation. His masterpiece, Infinite Jest, is a book that's over 1,000 pages long and includes over 400 footnotes. I have to admit, I've tried to read it on 3 different occasions and never gotten past 150 pages. It's a maddeningly complex, difficult book. My colleague, Dr. Brandon Hobson, who's himself a novelist with 2 published books out, has tried to read it several times, and he's never been able to make it through it either. But towards the end of his career and the end of his life, Wallace kind of shifted focus. He wanted to communicate with people more directly and more emotionally, and I think this speech is a beautiful example of that. This is a very intelligent man who was born into not wealth, but comfort. His father was a philosophy professor. His mother was a high school English teacher. They lived in Illinois, around the Springfield area, I believe. David Foster Wallace was a nationally ranked amateur tennis player who got a bunch of offers from universities of tennis scholarships, but he decided instead that he wanted to focus on academics. He double majored in English and philosophy, but took a bunch of math courses just for fun, because after all, who doesn't take math courses just for fun, right? He was a genius, and he wrote what became his first novel while he was still in college. He later picked up a master's degree in creative writing at University of Arizona and began his all too short career as a fiction and nonfiction writer. In the piece, of course, his main theme is that we need to have empathy. We need to not assume the worst of each other, but rather assume the best of each other. And it's interesting to me that his audience here are young people just like he was 20 years before, right? People at Kenyon College, a fairly selective private liberal arts college that costs a lot of money to go to. So these are primarily young people that have come from families, upper middle class probably. They're families that have libraries full of books, that take vacations to Europe, that have had certain advantages that the average American student perhaps has not had. And I think that's significant because Wallace wants them to care about people. He doesn't want them to live in their own little "it's all about me" bubble. It's all too tempting for any of us to do that, but especially rich kids, right? And I think that message resonates. I know I get very upset when I see someone driving a Lexus with a Rolex on their wrist, abusing the help at a fast food restaurant, or abusing the server in a sit-down restaurant, or just looking down their nose at the people around them as if we're just impediments to their path to success. And I think Foster Wallace wants these young people, as they go forth into the world, to remember that everyone around them is a human being worthy of respect and understanding. So this is an example of focusing on emotional learning or emotional intelligence rather than just up here, right? The heart as opposed to the head. Then we kind of shift gears into a collection of essays, both from the textbook and from Blackboard, about learning and education in a more narrow sense, as in school, right? Um, Sanford J. Unger's The New Liberal Arts and Freeman Hrabowski's Colleges Prepare People for Life are kind of similar essays. They both champion the liberal arts. They both make the case that liberal arts colleges, whether they be private schools like Goucher, which Unger was the president of, or public ones like University of Maryland campus that Hrabowski was president of, they are there to help prepare people for life and citizenship, not just for a job. Although Hrabowski reminds us that they also will vastly increase your earning potential as well. So they're champions of colleges, champions of the liberal arts. I am too. I teach English at a public community college, and I teach it not just about writing, but about thinking and about attitude, because I think those are important, probably more important aspects of life, certainly, than your writing skills. Although, don't get me wrong, those are important too, right? Alfie Kohn's From Degrading to Degrading is, wow, what an essay. The thing I would say about it is it's hard to argue with. It's possible, I'm sure, to argue with it, but in order to do so, you would have to do a ton of research to find sources in defense of grading that you could marshal to debunk Kohn's many sources against grading, right? So it's not really the type of essay you can just say, oh, well, he's crazy, right? You can't do that. If so, you're not thinking. He supports his case very well. It's very persuasive. Every time I read it, it makes me want to say, yes, that's it. I'm going to do away with grades. I'm just going to tell people how they're doing in general terms, maybe give them a written assessment at the end, and then I remember, oh yeah, I can't do that because the system won't let me do that, right? I have to give a letter grade at the end of the year, and someone actually checks my Blackboard pages every few weeks to make sure I'm putting number grades in, right? Everything is set up on grading, and so I come away every time I teach Kohn's essay a little sad, because part of me is convinced he's absolutely right. We start very early on telling students it's about your grades, and later on, of course, we tie their grades into whether they're going to be a success in life or not. We make it sound like if they get A's, they're going to be king of the world. If they get F's, they're going to be a homeless person sucking a bottle of wine in a gutter somewhere, right? We oversimplify because we want people to do well, but getting good grades is not the same thing as learning. I've had some grade grubbers, that's what I call them in class, that were obsessed with getting an A in the class, but they really were some of the most closed-minded, dullest students I've ever encountered. On the other hand, I've had students that I gave a C, a D, even an F to at the end of the semester because they had richly earned that grade, who were bright, inquisitive, curious, who spent a whole lot of time learning about things that excited them, and a lot of different things excited them, not just video games, TV, or beer, but they were not good students. They didn't do the school thing well, but they were good learners. And so I think Alfie Kohn is onto something. The tragedy is I'm not sure that we're ever going to get to where he would have us be. And in fact, that essay, if you'll notice, was published in 1999. 2 years later, the George W. Bush administration and Congress gave us No Child Left Behind, right? Which we're just now climbing out from under in education. So 2 years later, we embarked upon what's been a decade and a half experiment in constant standardized testing and assessment and norms and grades for schools and numbers and numbers and numbers, right? And I don't think our education system is really much better today than it was in 1999. So we went in the opposite direction from what Kohn is suggesting. I doubt that we're going to go in his direction, but maybe we're going to move back in a direction somewhere in between, right? A more humane type of testing, a more humanistic, learning-focused style. I certainly hope so. Mike Rose's Blue Collar Brilliance is one of my favorite essays. If you haven't read it yet, you're in for a treat. Mike Rose came from an Italian-American family in L.A. His parents were immigrants from Italy. His dad never finished much schooling at all. His mother worked as a waitress in a diner in Los Angeles. And in the essay, he focuses on his mother, Rosie Rose, what a great name, right? And an uncle of his, and studies them both to help him make his case that so-called blue-collar work, whether it be Rosie's waitressing or the uncle's working in an auto plant, involves a great deal more intelligence, reading, communication skills, etc., than we assume, right? We assume that there are people like me that work with their brains, and there are people that work with their hands, and the reality is much more complex, right? A lot of blue-collar jobs and office jobs, service sector jobs, I probably couldn't do. Not because I'm not smart enough, but because I don't possess the kind of time management skills, ability to think quickly, and adjust to changing conditions. The book learning I have would not equip me well to do a lot of those jobs. So we're talking about, in some cases, the same types of intelligence, in other cases, different types of intelligence, right? But you can't say that those jobs don't require intelligence, that they're just for dummies that can't make it in college, right? So as a son of working class parents myself, neither of whom ever finished high school, and who all their lives worked with their hands, with their bodies, if you will, but also with their heads, you know, I appreciate what he says, because it makes a whole lot of sense to me. So those are the readings we've been doing. I just wanted to give you kind of my short gloss on it. My comments on the discussion board from time to time will hopefully go into a little bit more detail about specific points of the readings. I hope you're enjoying them. In Unit 2, after you finish the first essay, we're going to shift gears and be looking at a cluster of readings, mainly from the book, on the economy, the effects of technology on us as individuals and on the economy, and gender and race issues, which of course have been very much in the news during the presidential campaign and continuing on to today. Essay 2, just to preview this for you, will be a problem-solving essay. And of course, most people may choose to write about a problem related to those Unit 2 topics of the economy, technology, gender, race, etc. But if you're really interested in the topic of education and you want to come back and write about education-related problem on Essay 2, that's perfectly fine as well. Okay, that's all I have for this particular video. I'll try to post another one within the next few days, then talk a little bit more about your first major essay assignment. The diagnostic essays, I've had a hard time getting started on them because of a lot of extracurricular stuff that I'm involved with that's been occupying way too much of my time. But I promise you I will have some scores for you by at least the middle of next week, and I will try to get some comments on Turnitin and let you guys know when those are available. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions about anything I've said in this or about anything at all, please send me an email, and I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Sorry I haven't been active online as much. As I said, it's been a crazy week of meetings and emails and setting up appearances for people and this, that, and the other. But I should have a lot more energy to focus on this class over the later part of the weekend and the first part of next week. So just keep your eyes open, okay? Thank you very much, and hope you're having a good day. Bye.